Okay, greetings and welcome to NinjaTrader 8 Strategy Builder Video 14. I am John Moss with J2 AlgoTrader. I need to add a new line to this beginning because a lot of people, at least up front, sometimes don't even know that there's an entire series, although the name kind of gives that away. Yes, there is a series of videos prior to this. If you are new to the Strategy Builder, do recommend you start from one and go from there. Gang, I have started in on this one immediately after finishing 13, and then today's price action, we've given the material that I covered in video 13. Man, I just want to dive right into it. It's immediately given me material, though, for an entire video all to itself. So I will address more items off of 13 relative to today's price action in video 15. But as promised, we're going to dive into two very specific things in this video. That is, we're going to build a strategy on the Fibonacci pivots, one specific thing about them, and then we're going to look at scalping on the trend bias. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Okay, so blank screen. So I got a call from Big Ray. Big Ray says, hey. I said, what? He said, if R1 of the Fibonacci pivots gets a candle that finishes above R1, then the likelihood of it hitting R2 of those Fibonacci pivots is in the 90th percentile range. And I'm like, really? And he said, yeah. So I said, well, you got to know. That's a Gordon Gekko moment right there. So yes, I had to go investigate that. And I did. And I didn't build a strategy around it. I'm just sitting there looking, and I've been paying attention to it ever since he told me that. And it has merit worth looking at. So I find this a good opportunity to build out a strategy. We'll start off very basic and continue building on it. And let's see what we can get out of it. So following through with some recommendations off of video 13, first things first, so let's come along and add a watermark to this chart to identify it as to its purpose. Apply that. All right. Next thing, let's add the Fibonacci pivot indicator. Let's pull up Strategy Builder. And we have a new strategy. Let's call this Fibonacci R1 test. And for our description, strategy tests out validity of R1 break to minimum R2 touch. As always, I'm going to stay with on bar close. Additional data, nothing for now, nor custom series. We won't put any variables in yet, but let's go with some basics here. All right, here in the beginning, we're going to build a very simple system and build off of it, so we'll just leave this as is. Let's go ahead and just get stops and targets out of the way. Coming along here and just doing our usual. Since we put it in the user interface, we're now adding it to the primary stop and target system. All right, let's come along, and as you know, I like making groups. So we got a long Fibonacci R1 breach, if all. Okay, so right now, we don't really care what time it is. So in the moment, we're not putting any time constraints. First thing, let's go add our long switch. All right, next thing, let's make sure that we are not in an active trade. So we'll say current market position is equal to market position of flat. Now, in the past, I've handled this slightly different, but now I've noticed that this thing works consistently. Just, years ago, just for whatever reason, it didn't, because it's automatically included in the strategy with the original conditions, and I used to add it after the fact, but we can get away with this. So we'll make one line instead of two, not long or not short. And then we want to isolate the condition, so we'll say the close of the previous bar was less than the Fibonacci pivot of R1, also one bar ago. Okay? Then we're going to say that the close of the current bar is greater than the Fibonacci pivot of R1. Matter of fact, we'll even say less equal here. Even better. Because that can happen a lot. It'll come up and tap R1 and bounce off before it goes past it. We need to see it pass R1. And now initially that's all we want to do to start with, okay? So if we get that, we will tell it to enter into a long position. Number of contracts that we have set. Call that long. Compile it. Now going back We did set, since we don't really know what our ranges are going to be, we have deliberately made this quite extensive. So that's a solid 30 points, right? Now, if it gets 30 points, even if it hadn't hit R2 yet, that's still a hell of a trade, right? So I'm going to leave it. But for the most part, I doubt that we would see that kind of a condition anywhere near a recurrent basis. So we need to create an exit condition to get out. Again, our objective is if R1 has been breached, then if it touches or passes R2, we're going to go ahead and take our profit. So here we go with a new set, if any, and then we group. And we'll call this Fibonacci R2 target hit, if all. Okay? And first thing, if our current market position equals market position long, so we're in a long, everything else we include gets utilized. And we're going to keep this very simple again. We're simply going to say that if the close of the current bar is greater or equal to Fibonacci pivot value plot R2, we will tell it to get out from our long signal, leave default quantity, and we'll even give it a name this time. We'll call this Fib R2 exit. And on our initial test, that's it. It's very simple. So we start with that. Let's go ahead and remember what I've taught in the past, that you want to be utilizing your test market time frame for when the market was actually trading as the real instrument currently in play. In this particular case, today's April 4th, so we're going to go back to about roughly March 8th or thereabouts. So what? Let's just say 26 days. Alright, so let's just have a cursory look and see what happened. Plug it in, long, sim, enabled, apply. Okay, let's just roll back and have a fast look. Got that one. Got that one. Check this out though, look at that. We're on a 5-minute right now, and this can happen a lot. We had this huge bar, and it did its job, but look, we missed all of this right here. Also, bear in mind, we have not created an exit system for the losses here yet. All right, check that out right there. So this is in the same day. Here, you know, roughly 2 o'clock in the morning, it went in, made its R2, then breached it again, but it never made it. Well, you're seeing what I'm seeing as we roll through this. It's had a pretty high level of success so far, but let's go see what the performance told us. And bear in mind, this is a very short time frame we're testing. Look at that, percent profitable, 78%. That's impressive. Very. Now again, that's this is only 20 days and it's not 90 percentile, but still, that is absolutely worth looking at. So the immediate first thing we need to do is check this out on a larger time frame. So let's switch over to the previous contract so we can get a full 3 months and start with that. All right, so let's go to connections, flip over into playback. We'll come along and double check on the historical data that I in fact have everything that I need, which in fact I do by downloading the historical data. Don't know how to do that, check previous videos. We are good to go there. Now, come over here. Now, going through the Christmas holidays, these aren't the best time frames to be tested. We're going to do it anyway. So let's go ahead and start on the Sunday, a couple days prior to the switch over, and we shall run all the way through to March 8th. All right, so up here we have the correct instrument. All right, now, next thing, let's go fix our data series, and let's run it back 90 days. All right, let's get this thing fired up again, and let's see how we did. All right, longer time frame, we got 67%, which as basic as this thing is still a respectable number. Notice that we have a negative value here, so we have some work to do. All right, so gang, this is where the research comes in, and this is a time-consumptive process. In all seriousness, I did not take this to this level in terms of really trying to build a strategy out. You and I are doing this together right now. So the process here is I am going to be testing out a variety of things Literally, I'm keeping the recorder running as I investigate stuff, and rather than walk you through all the losers, I'll simply tell you what didn't work. But let's go find some winners, and let's start fixing this thing. And that's the part, obviously, that we care about. Now, I'm going to speed this up, but I'm just going to take a cursory look, just looking at the chart, see what I initially see, if anything worth looking at. You know, one of the first things that I'm thinking about is whether or not we are dealing with a virgin R1, R2 hit. By definition, the first time in the most current session that R1 has been breached, and it's going after R2. There is a good degree of truth in saying that once a particular barrier or magnet has been reached, surpassed, gone back under, what have you, it simply stands to reason that they have less value. But right here, we're looking at a single session where we got 3 of them. So I don't know if I want to plug that in. We may, but right now I'm not going to set up that variable. One thing I did notice, and it does stand to reason, that R1 is assumedly always going to be above the open. We don't know that to be true, but I did in fact test that out previously. So we may come along and use the open for something. I haven't figured out what yet, but we can if we want to. I gotta admit, one thing that I like about this also is that it does not matter what time of day it is. You can start this thing anytime you want. Here's something also we may want to try taking into consideration. Notice that we're on a 5-minute bar again, and we got this jump right here. We missed out on damn near 7 points worth of value on this because it didn't get in until this bar closed. That is another thing I did initially look at, was whether or not a shorter time frame would make any difference. In fact, that the performance went down. Go figure. So in other words, if I turn this into a 1 minute, I'll catch this quicker. But in the end, it just had a poor performance. But again, that was not an extensive test, and probably could certainly do a much better job, which is, of course, what we're attempting to do here. I do definitely also see, because as we have been moving along, of course, I sped it up and you're not seeing it, but what I am seeing, I've seen a lot of the breach of the R1 only to come back, go back under it, and come back up and make its target. So if we were to use, for example, hey, if it went back under R1, get out, it'd probably kill a ton of good entries, so we can't use that. All right, so just not to waste your time, I did look at quite a bit of this. There's nothing in particular that really jumps out to be dealt with, so now I'm going to start pulling out some of my favorite rabbits out of the hat. Very first thing, Cum Delta. All right, let me load up my visuals real quick. All right, I'm just going to take a quick visual inspection. I'm going to zip through this, not dragging y'all through it. All right, just a visual was a little bit conclusive, but of course the easy and best way to find out is to plug it in and let's see what happens. So, bring our strategy builder up, and now let me do one thing right quick. The Cum Delta is calculating on every tick. And in hard code, you can capture the hard value. But for Strategy Builder, just to make things simple and to ensure that we get an accurate value the easy way, we're simply going to tie a very tiny EMA to the cumulative delta indicator and use that to get our Cum Delta number. We'll also have to add tick series data in order for Cum Delta to work inside the strategy itself. So let me get that set up. All right, so coming back to our strategy builder here, anytime you're using a Cum Delta, you have to add additional data. You just have to capture the tick. So we'll simply say primary instrument, whatever chart we're on, load up tick value 1, and the Cum Delta will work appropriately. Without it, it will not. Let's come to our entry and simply say the following. We have tagged the EMA to the Cum Delta, so we're going to say indicator EMA 3 of the current bar reading the J2 Cum Delta is greater than the numeric value. And we're going to say, hey, 1,000, all right? Maybe, how about 1,100? Work with that. So what's happening here, this little EMA right here has to be greater than 1,100, so right up in here, or it will not take an entry. All right, compile it. Let's see what happens now. All right, straight to strategy performance. How'd we do? We still have lost money there. No real effect, if all, if any, really, about 2% on the performance. So, obviously that was worthless. But before we kill it, let's just check and see if we go to some level of extreme, what, if any, effect that may have for us. So let's come back in, come back to this requirement, and let's raise this number 5,000. Rather obvious thing to say, but obviously the higher we go with our cum delta, the assumption, of course, is that we have a much more bullish environment. Restart. Listen, gang, always pay attention to up here. You see it's still calculating. Of course, I sped this up for you, but you want to make sure that it's done before you turn on your test. Okay, that improved our performance, and it brought us up to there. So right here with this 74% profitability, my line in the sand stands at 67. Obviously, you want it as high a number as you can get. But for the fun of it, let's test out an even stronger. So let's push it up further and see what happens. Let's go with 8,000. Slight increase in profitability, but we made, comparatively speaking, a lot less money. What, like 40%? So I'm going to go back and just set that. Matter of fact, I'll do one more thing. I am going to, let's set that to 3,000. All right, see what happened. Whoa, wow. Murdered on that. All right. Again, it's a bit of the math game, but that 5,000 in this particular case did work for us. Let's make an assumption that that was high enough. So first thing, come back and change it. Gang, I want to stress again, it's a little bit of playing the math game here, but we did get a good result out of it, so we're going to go with it. Now also, we killed a lot of good trades. Is there something else out there? Remember, this is why I like using groups. So we have this group. We know, at least in this particular case, that it has worked. But before we do that, let's take a cursory look and see what, if anything, may jump out at us regarding our stops. Because right now, of course, we're taking a full test stop. This is a little bit unique in that we are running the entire session. And this sort of enterprise, figuring out what to do with your stops, is absolutely one of the most time-consumptive things that you can do when you're trying to build out these strategies. You have to be very careful. Again, math game, math game, math game. In many cases, you could wind up killing what otherwise would have been a lot of killer entries. So let's start with this one. All right, so we have a non-virgin entry right here, and it was clearly making its way down. Now we can come along and start playing with moving averages, but, you know, right off the bat, you can see that we had a little bit of a downward moving average right here in the short term. Looking at it further in the overnight, a larger moving average come into play. Let's have a fast look. I'm very partial to SMAs. You've got all kinds of moving averages out there. All those variations of moving averages really better applied for short-term trades. This is clearly a type of entry in which time is so far not necessarily a factor. So we go with an industry standard. Add that. Let's go with 100 and see what happens here. And sure enough, even our 100 was on its way down right here on a good entry. Change it to a 200. Once again, not a help. Now we got, that was good there, but look, we got a rising 200 here and still took a loser. Bearing in mind also that moving averages are going to change how they behave depending on the time frame in which you are looking at. In my case, as you know, I'm very partial to 5-minute on something like this. That said, one potentiality here is that the 200 was rising every step of the way in this one, all the way to the target. But over here, started off okay, but then it dipped south. Check it out. It began dipping south right about there, so potentially we can set up an exit argument to get us out, either here or here, depending on where it hits when the bar closes. All right, so let's come back to our strategy builder. Now we have this, our target hit. So just for the sake of efficiency, we're going to use this same set. We could come along and create a new one, but we'll just keep this a little bit neater. Copy and paste. I'm going to come down, and obviously what we're fixing to do is not going to be the R2 target. So let's just get rid of it. And so here we go. If we're in a long, we'll get rid of that. come along and say if the SMA 200 of the current bar is less than the SMA 200 1 bar ago, get out. Compile it. Restart. Now, conveniently, we didn't leave this little spot on the chart. We saw we had a loss that was here all the way down to here. We'll have a fast, easy look. Verify it's working. Which it clearly did. That saved us a bunch of money right there. Let's see what, if any, total positive effect in our favor that it may have had overall. And it absolutely did. And look how it dropped our profitability, but it increased our total net profit. Let's go investigate that because we made more money, so this is worth looking at, but I want a higher profit number than that. This is going to take some time. I'm going to just zip through this as far as you're concerned in this video. There should be, one rather obvious conclusion to come to before I mention it. Let's see if you've already thought of it. Right now, I'm looking for it. All right, there we go. I was looking for this. Look how the 200 is basically kind of flatlined right here, and it took a long. You can just barely see right there, but we're talking decimal points, but it was declining. So our problem there was that we did not include it as part of the entry system. We've made it an exit. If it's less, get out, but we didn't include it on our entry system. So let's add it. Okay, I've done this quite on purpose because it goes to show that if you set up any kind of argument as an exit condition to get out, you have to make sure that you included it in your entry system as well. Otherwise, of course, you'll just jump right out in instances as we have just demonstrated. So here we go, SMA 200 on the 0 bar. The current bar is greater. SMA 200 1 bar ago. Okay. Compile. All right, let's restart it. All right, and that took care of that. Let's check total performance. All right, we're getting there. 66.67. I mean, damn, that's like right on it. So that's a system that we're going to keep. So let's continue on and see what else we can find. Again, I'm going to speed this up. I'm going to go hunt and see what I see. Now, here's a scenario worth looking at, referring back once again to virgin situations. Now, again, we don't care what time it is. We have a cumulative delta requirement. Now, here in the overnight, so moving forward a little bit here, we saw that this particular R1 breach failed. Let me check it out. It's already been up in this territory. Clearly, it's making its way down. The 200 did not help us here. And back here, we missed an opportunity. I mean, look, we breached the R1 here on this candle, and clearly we made our R2, and our 200 was our pal every step of the way. But the reason that we did not get in here is because we have right now a 5,000 minimum cumulative delta requirement. Let's stop and consider that. We got a couple things going on. First of all, that R1 got hit. Let's just move it over, make it a little easier to see. At 6:20 in the evening, all right, hour and a half in Chicago after the market had opened. So it's a virgin, all right? But you know what? Look, let's get real. There's just not a whole lot of volume activity at all going on at that time frame. So I'm curious as to whether or not it might benefit us to try to capture that. So in summary, we are looking at the very opening of the session. Our R1 has gotten hit. Our 2 got hit. Our 200 worked for us. What can we do about that? And the answer to that is we need to isolate a condition that will allow us to take that trade. What does that mean? This is where I'm going to stop. What I told you earlier is that we literally are building this out together. Clearly, this is a system worth working on. But in order to isolate, I need to stop. We need to create conditional sets, and we need to create bool switches to make our user interface more efficient so that we can isolate particular entry systems at will. So what I'm about to do is to come back in and redesign this strategy so that we can begin the process of creating unique additional sets and isolate them and test them out. In this particular case, the very first one we're going to do is we're going to recognize that we have much less volume going on in the evening, and again, we have those early hits that we're otherwise missing out on due to our cum delta requirement, which is probably a good thing in the regular session, or at least after London opened, but it's not behooving us during the beginning of the session. So we need to find out whether or not that is time well spent. That's what we're going to do. You will find that I have loaded this strategy onto the site. This video is going to be 14A. We're going to have 3 parts to it, 14A, B, and C. I'll make a strategy for each one of them. And in the immediate moment, this one will be posted again, of course, if you would decide you want to play with it for a little bit. In furtherance, the particular strategy that I create can actually be utilized as a base strategy pretty much at any time. I'll discuss that in 14B. In the immediate moment, I think we're onto something here, so we're going to find out. Ladies and gentlemen, until next.